Old historicism, and we've talked about formalism, so now it's time to talk about new historicism. And the idea behind new historicism is looking at, has this poem been successful over time? Does its meaning change? Is it still relevant today? What about our current culture is still accepting of the meaning of the poem, right? So if we think back to a poem like Harlem by Langston Hughes, um, he is writing about, we're 80 years removed from the Civil War now, and we still don't have the same rights as white people. We got rid of slavery, but we haven't gotten rid of segregation. We don't live in a just society, right? We've been promised justice. And so if you read that poem in the 1960s, right, then it's going to read the exact same. He's talking about the exact same rights um, that people in the 1960s are talking about when we end segregation. Now, people reading that today, do we still have problems with justice? Well, I think a lot of people reading Hughes's poem today would say the dream of true racial equality in the United States has never been realized. And so, even though he's writing about 80 years after the Civil War, we're reading this 100 years later and getting the same message, right? And so, um, events like the Black Lives Matter movement, that's a phenomena. If you see the word phenomena on the slide here, events like that tell us that we don't have this dream, right? That it's never been realized. And so that's something I would point to. Now, how would I prove it? I would go to, read some articles. I wouldn't just say, you know, well, we have Black Lives Matter and therefore. I would look at some articles. I would look at, are there other people who have suggested this poem or this author, which is more likely you're going to find the author, is still speaking to us today, right? Or I might make that connection on my own. I might find some articles that talk about what Black Lives Matter means and then go back to this is what the poem means, right? And they're saying the same thing or very similar things, and that's how we're going to see that the poem ages very well. So that's a brief example of new historicism. If we look at a poem like "O Captain, My Captain," um, maybe it ages pretty well. I could kind of see somebody who's a big Trump supporter feeling like Trump is their captain, right? Has fallen and um, that the he made all these changes, but he's not going to be around to see them through or something like that. I could kind of see that. He hasn't died, but he was defeated, and I think to his hardcore base, that's kind of the same thing. So I could kind of see that, right? I think I could make that argument, but I'm also a pretty savvy arguer and I'm pretty good at these things. So I think most people who would read My Captain would say, no, it's not really relevant today. That's about Lincoln. It's clearly about Lincoln. And you can apply that thinking of here's this cherished person who's like a father and the father of my school or the father of my nation, who cares for me and I care for them, and this is a sad thing, but it's not going to land directly as well as Hughes's poem is. So that's kind of something to think about with new historicism. It's a pretty interesting perspective to look at poetry for, and a way to extend your thinking and your conversation skills about poetry.